One of the reasons I wrote The Philosophy of Jesus was for a very simple reason. What was his philosophy? What was it that was important to him? What was the philosophy of Jesus? What was it that he said? What was his message? I think that his message has gotten lost in all of the religious meaning around his declared death and resurrection, the events that were basically the foundation of Christianity. Christians all over the world focus on his death and resurrection. Maybe they're right to do so. After all, how many people can claim they rose from the dead by themselves? Not very many, let's be honest. But with the focus being on the resurrection, as well as the letters of Paul and the sayings of the Old Testament, I think his message, what he actually said, has gotten lost in the shuffle. And frankly, that is a shame because he had a very powerful message. And it doesn't matter whether you believe he was the Messiah, as Christians do, or if you agree with the Muslims and claim he was a great prophet, or even an avatar, like many Hindus do. Of course, you could also say he was a total fool, as many atheists claim. But very few actually take the time to read the sources we have, the four Gospels, and figure out not so much what he did, but what he actually said. I mean, think about it. What was it he actually said? What was his message? Oh, sure, we know some of the sayings he did. I mean, the Beatitudes, some of the parables that he stated. We know bits and pieces here and there. But what was it he actually said? What was his main message? What was his actual philosophy? A philosophy that drove him to do what he did and say what he said. Don't think that he didn't have a philosophy. He did. Anybody alive today has a philosophy. Anybody who's ever lived has a philosophy, even if it's a very simple one. Jesus had a philosophy. Now, what was it that his philosophy was? Some of you may think you know it, but I can almost guarantee you're wrong. I mean, it took me months looking over all of the words and sayings that were in the four known sources we have of what he said, the four Gospels. And it took me a long time weighing his words and figuring it out. Surprisingly, Jesus himself said what was important. And when you take what he said was most important and apply the rest of what he said based on what he said was most important, it all falls into place like a puzzle fitting together. Now, I will admit it was very difficult to even start this work. After all, this is not like working on the philosophy of, say, Plato or Aristotle, Aquinas, or Augustine. We can state their philosophies quite readily. Shoot, there are even books out there that say what it was. But they are not tied to the movement that is Christianity, that Jesus is. And we're talking about what is literally the dominant religion, the dominant faith, the dominant belief in the Western world. Over 1 billion people believe in it. That's a huge number. Whether you're Catholic or Orthodox, Mormon, Anglican, Lutheran, Calvinist, or whatever, you are part of what is the largest religion in the world. And Jesus is so central to it. In fact, he is so tied to it, it's hard to discuss what he said without sounding like you're preaching. You can do it with Plato or Augustine. That's no problem. I mean, you state what their philosophies were, what their positions were. Nobody's saying you're preaching. You do it with Jesus, oh, he or she is preaching. It's practically a guarantee. That's how tied in Jesus is to the religion. So it's very hard to do this without any preaching element. In fact, it may have been impossible. But I gave it my best shot. I basically wanted a single work that figured out no, that stated what his message was. Not his mission, his message. And like I said already, it's a very powerful one. So read the book. Once you finish it, I think you'll agree. It's a very simple message. It's also a very powerful one. And I think that once you finish reading it, you'll understand what it was he said.